attending, for coming down. Given that there has been a lot of movement in the business community towards climate neutrality, carbon neutrality, and emissions reductions over the past few years, we wanted to create this showcase of us, Carbon Credit Capital. We are a carbon footprint management company and carbon offset provider in New York. And some of our partners, SA Expeditions, Only Natural Pet, and Be Social Change, all of whom have measured their emissions and taken actions to offset and taken actions to reduce emissions internally. We have today with us Andy Downs, the Senior Marketing Manager at Only Natural Pet, along with his colleague and someone who I have worked closely with over the years, Rachel Sears. Also at Only Natural Pet, we also have Corey J., the Project Manager at SA Expeditions, and Jen Lashansky of Be Social Change, and myself. I am Reed Shapiro, and I will be facilitating the day. We wanted to start off kind of giving some context of in the midst of all of these other solutions that exist in terms of reducing emissions internally and absolutely as an organization, why go with offsets? What brought you to that decision? From there, we want to kind of cover the different means and approaches that everyone took to arrive at their respective carbon neutral claims, how quality was assured throughout the process, both in the starting and in the rollout, and then ultimately the benefits that carbon neutrality has brought to the brand, as well as any challenges or advice that our panelists might have for companies who are aspiring to follow in their footsteps. So I will I've prefaced it a little bit, but ultimately we know that, at least at CCC, we know that there are lots of other initiatives that go on and that require attention, and frankly, in some cases, are more priority for companies. And so we wanted to understand what the internal factors for why choose offsets, as well as some of the external factors that you saw that influenced your internal decision making, and how you've couched this in context of the other efforts that you're making. So I'll just go right down the line and invite Only Natural Pet. We've now been working together since 2016. And I know your story, but I'd like, hopefully we can hear from you guys what brought you down this path in the first place.
For sure, yeah, I can start. Thanks for having us today, Reed, and thank you, Carbon Credit Capital, and everyone else on the panel here and everyone visiting. It's great to talk, climate change solutions. Rachel and I are big sustainability nerds, so it's great to be talking with peers about this. So my name is Andy Downs. I'm the Marketing and Sustainability Manager with Only Natural Pet. And, just some background on Only Natural Pet. We've been around since 2004. We offer natural health solutions for companion animals. And the second part of our mission statement, along with offering those health solutions, is concentration on environmental and social initiatives. So really the internal driver, one of the nice things for our company is culturally we're committed to environmental initiatives and seeing what we can do as a brand to influence not only the pet industry, but hopefully consumer packaged goods in general. So that's where we stand with everything. From an external decision-making perspective, I think that the customers are going to start wanting this from companies. We're already seeing it catch up, and we're seeing big companies like Amazon and Walmart really make initiatives for reducing their carbon emissions and finding innovative solutions to combat climate change. Honestly, I think this year has been a real eye-opener for a lot of customers. So the fact that we're out in front of this and we're working with a reputable partner like Carbon Credit Capital it just puts us in a good position to market our products better, to be innovative in our industry, and yeah, really press forward with climate solutions.
Excellent, thank you. I guess let's go with Corey. I know that SA Expeditions makes a lot of efforts in terms of the way that you orchestrate these trips, but I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Reed. I'm Corey. I am the project manager and now brand manager at SA Expeditions. We're a California-based tour operator that sells private custom travels down to South America primarily, though with the pandemic, we've been pivoting a little bit and we're looking to expand into North America, Central America. We've been fully remote since 2015. So the kind of remote shift that everyone experienced earlier this year, we got to experience those hurdles a couple years ago and have really embraced it. The last few years, we've leaned into our company purpose. We've got 3 main pillars, which are conservation, community, and awareness. So decided to really start walking the talk. We got in touch with Carbon Credit Capital, decided to apply to become a B Corporation, which I know Carbon Credit Capital is. We're still in that process, but the chance to offset our carbon and then figure out how we can, travel has the potential to make a lot of carbon, create a lot of carbon, all of the flights, all of the cars, all of the hotel stays. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't negatively impacting the pretty fragile environments and ecosystems that we visit. And it became really, really easy to do through Carbon Credit Capital. And mostly our goal plan, our game plan was to start walking the talk and really make sure we don't negatively impact any of the environments or ecosystems we visit with our travelers.
Thank you. And Jen, I know that Be Social Change, you guys run, what is it, like 30 or 40 events a year?
At least.
So, so you guys have a lot of moving parts. So it'd be interesting to hear how this fits in.
Sure. Sure. So a tiny bit about Be Social Change. We are a membership community dedicated to helping people make their greatest impact. And in order to do so, we host weekly workshops, webinars, and events on different social impact topics so that our community can both gain insights and skills as well as connections in order to make an impact. One of the core central components of our work, even though we talk about Be Social Change, is environmental change. They're inextricably bound, right? And so because of that, sustainability is, and not even just sustainability, but regeneration is a main discussion topic at every single event that we host. One event that inspired our carbon emissions reduction process was the future of clean energy. And what we realized in actually reaching out to Carbon Credit Capital and having an initial conversation was that there was an opportunity that we hadn't even realized was available in order to reduce the emissions and even make them carbon neutral of every single one of the in-person events that we were hosting at that time in New York City. So with their incredible assessment skills, we were able to ensure that all customer travel, all the snacks and drinks that we, when I say customer, I mean audience travel, all the snacks and drinks were carbon neutral, the heating for the space, every component of our events became carbon neutral. And that was important to us, but it was also important to our community. Our community came to our events in order to start making an impact, and why not do so right there and then? So our community, we actually, and I'll share a little bit more about this later, our community was highly involved in the process. They ended up voting for where our carbon credits would go, and they have been huge fans of this. We had a big certificate at the very front, so people kind of would high five the folks checking them in when that was available. And so it was something that we wanted to continue even when we moved online because of the pandemic with all of our events, is figuring out, yes, it's way less carbon emissions because there's no travel, there's no snacks and drinks that we ourselves are providing, but there's still a bit of emissions from people being on their computers and energy use. So our community will be delighted to know that we're also covering the expense of the carbon expense for them joining our events. We've also worked with other producers to ensure that the electricity in our venues and even in our personal homes and in our communities' homes are sourced from 100% renewable energy. So we try and ensure that at each step of the way, we're living in alignment with the values that we talk about on a weekly basis.
Thank you, Jen. So we got a couple more minutes allotted for this section. I know that ONP, I believe your stores are running on renewables, and I know that a number of your processing and manufacturing facilities are pretty close to 100%. I guess I'll leave this kind of open to everyone, but in terms of the completeness of the, let's say, basket of sustainable initiatives that you all have taken on over time, including renewable energy and waste and all that, where did offsets ultimately fit in terms of your sequencing? Is this something that you started with, or is it something that you decided to get into once you had covered the rest of the gamut, so to speak?
Yeah, I can chime in from OMP's perspective, and Rachel can add as well. She's much more in touch with the supply chain. Just from our operations standpoint, we became a certified B Corp 2 years ago, and part of that was, in the environmental portion of that, they ask you a lot about what your greenhouse gas emissions look like. So Reed was a lifesaver on that, explaining what the scopes were and helping me understand how we fit into our role as an emitter, right? And in doing that, we were able to get the majority of our Scope 2 emissions into renewable energies. Being based out of Boulder, Colorado, we have a pretty progressive energy supplier that was able to get us direct. Before that, we were using renewable energy credits. But unfortunately, that's not the largest aspect of our emissions. The supply chain is really where most of the emissions come from, especially as a pet food manufacturer. And the work that Reed and Carbon Credit Capital have done have shown us that, oh yeah, actually growing this food is where a lot of these emissions are coming from. So Rachel, I don't know if you want to chime in on how we do that with our product lines.
Yeah, sure. And hi, everyone. Thanks again for being here and for inviting me to this panel. It's just great to, like Andy said, just have the space to talk about these issues that we're all so passionate about and are ultimately so deeply important right now and given this time. So I work on the product development team, and I'm responsible for sort of laying the groundwork and working with Reed personally to get our products, sort of getting that registration and getting that certification. So I do directly work with the suppliers to make sure that no one kind of just to vet out and see what they're using for their energy consumption, if they're adding in any renewable energy, such as wind power, making sure no one, is using coal or anything like that. So far, no one, so that's a great sign. We do have a vendor questionnaire as well that we send out. It's kind of a basic template that everybody fills out. And again, it's just sort of another vetting process to make sure we're looking at their practices and taking that all into account when we actually buy products from them, essentially. And just kind of a sneak peek, and we might get to it later as well, but we're also looking at utilizing upcycled ingredients in some of our newer products. It's very new, so it's kind of secretive, still in development, but definitely something we're looking at in a current product line of treats, and then something that we would continue to look at as we expand into different product lines, as well as sort of novel, sustainable protein aspects, aside from like your basic meats and animal proteins. Probably more to come on that later, but so just kind of different aspects of everything, trying to look at the supply chain and see where we can make improvements in the sustainability aspect.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to move us on to the next piece of discussion, which is ultimately the approaches that everyone took. And I don't want there to be any confusion. Everyone kind of, whatever work was done was as rigorous as can be done. But Only Natural Pet, you started off with, I think, 4 SKUs, and now we're at like 47. And SA Expeditions, when we first got together, you guys had done some considerable work already that we kind of did a secondary review of, and Be Social Change, you guys kind of jumped in all at once. So I'll go back up the line and start with you, Jen. I guess we talked about why offsets, but then in terms of scoping the initiative for yourselves and something that would be manageable for you and that works for you, be interested to hear about how you guys kind of arrived at these approaches that we ultimately took together.
Absolutely. For us, our product is a bit different than, for example, a food line, which there's got to be so many different elements of a supply chain there, right? Our product is a in-person event, and so we felt that rather than trying to segment it out by month or by each event or by topic, what made sense for us in the space that we were in was to go all in, right? To offset an entire year's worth of carbon for our product, because ultimately in the end, our product is simple, and we wanted it to be pretty immediate and a pretty loud statement about where our values were and what opportunities exist for our community as well. Our community includes a lot of organizations as well as individuals, and so it was important to us that they saw an avenue for them to pursue and follow as well. And so our decision to go all in at once was really to try and create the statement of what's possible, and Carbon Credit Capital made that really easy.
Glad to hear that part. Corey, I'll turn to you on your work, because you guys did a considerable amount of effort went into the documentation that we reviewed, and I'll get into that a little bit in the next slide, but yeah.
Yeah, we are relatively new to the kind of, like I said earlier, walking the talk, that we just got certified with CCC earlier in 2020. So we're it's encouraging to hear that my colleagues on the call here have been here since 2016. That's great. But we didn't really know where to start at first. We knew that carbon neutrality was a long-term goal of ours, but we didn't know if that was long-term in the next quarter or in the next 5 years. So we started doing some legwork on our own to start to kind of get an idea of what even carbon we produced in the trips that we sell, and wanted to kind of get a vague idea about how much the cost would be on our end, to know if we can plan it into this year or the next 2 years or 3 years. So we ended up doing a lot of calculations about flight routes and distances driven. We go to Machu Picchu a lot. We do cruises to the Galapagos Islands, and I don't know how many of you are aware, but cruises are really heavy in carbon emissions, depending on what ships and where you go and everything. So it varied a lot, and we realized that we didn't know kind of the first thing about carbon emissions, so started doing a lot of calculations on our end. And then when we reached out to Carbon Credit Capital, they said, well, we can do a review. And we said, but we've got this information. Can you just look it over? And we got a lot of really good insight. Reed, I think you said, well, what about hotels? And we didn't even consider hotels. So there was some definitely review to be done and corrections to be made. But it was really excellent to be able to kind of get an idea on our end at the beginning, and then have that essentially audited by Carbon Credit Capital. And we were very close, except for those hotels. But it gave us an idea of if kind of the timeline when we wanted to get this done and what was feasible.
It was interesting because, I mean, we expected to have sweeping changes, but I mean, ultimately you were pretty close, and there were only a few trips that were way off, and there were, unfortunately for us as a company, there were a couple of trips that we calculated that were less carbon intensive than you had originally found yourselves. And Rachel and I'll throw it back to you guys. We've had an interesting journey over the years. So I'll let you, I guess maybe Rachel, I'll direct this one to you.
Yeah, so, and I'll probably throw it back, and maybe Andy and I could just collaborate, but I wasn't in the initial setup, but I know we started with one product line. I know we were passionate about trying to get some of our biggest drivers as far as so the products that we sell the most of, we wanted to get those certified in terms of, the amount of weight that we move in those products each year. And so to start with those and then kind of grow from there. Reed, I know I've got some more coming to you. So yeah, we're close to 50, and I've got about 14 on one sheet, and then 4 of those other treats that I was just talking about. So just looking to add more and more. I think that gets us up to about just under 70 products. So that's great. I mean, we have a large portfolio of products, but it is still a subset. I think Andy could probably speak to, I think we have upwards of almost 200 if you count our supplements. So maybe we'll get into that realm someday, hopefully. But kind of now we're just looking more and more in the initial development of what we can sort of get in there. We also did just add, our newest addition was some hard good products. So that would kind of a new adventure. We were just doing food, and now we're looking at like some beds and rope toys and different things made from organic hemp. So looking at the sourcing of those and making sure that's more sustainable than other products on the market, and then adding in the carbon credit certification. So to sort of make it an all around good product for the environment. So that's where we are now. But Andy, if you have anything to add, feel free.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is just from an operational standpoint, we also use carbon credit capital to offset the emissions that we can't do normally. Like, you know, we invest in renewables for energy sources, but you still need to deliver products to your stores, and you still need to, you know, heat water with natural gas and all of those things. And so, yeah, I am not always the best on the administrative side of getting Reed the information he needs, but we do collect it as far as corporate flights and things of that nature, just to also include for offsets.
And I guess we'll get into kind of, I know certain consideration in all of this is cost and controlling the cost, and as well as time and overhead spent on this, but I think we'll get into that in a little bit. I think we can transition now to this piece on ensuring quality, and I've budgeted a little bit less time for this section because while we've included everyone in our work and we deliver all of our results, I don't think that you guys have had to get so immersed into the carbon accounting, but I guess maybe there's some discussion to be had. For example, the work that SA Expeditions did prior to us getting together. There are, and this is, I guess, really for the attendees, there are very well recognized greenhouse gas accounting standards. These top four, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but these, the GRI, the GHG protocol, the UK's DEFRA, and the US EPA, they all give guidance on organizational greenhouse gas accounting. And the GRI and the GHG protocol are both, more so the GRI, are both incredibly rigorous. And then when you get in, and so for Only Natural Pets operations, for Be Social Change, for SA Expeditions trips, you can kind of see that these top four standards have a pretty solid range of things that they can cover. But then when you get into carbon neutral products, specific claims around services, there's this PAS standard that's developed by the British Standards Institute, and this ISO standard that I don't know if people are familiar with, you know, the ISO 9000 and the ISO 14000 standards, but they're developed by the American National Standards Institute, and they give guidance for how organizations can basically do carbon accounting and make claims. And it's a safe bet to say that if you follow these standards and get your hands on them, the carbon accounting that you produce should be reliable. And so that's one part of it. But then once you have metrics to deal with, once you have a framework for measuring, the other piece of it is the offset projects themselves. And I guess maybe I can open it up here a little bit to the group to discuss. But you know, there are organizations out there that they claim they're planting trees and may send you a certificate that says something along the lines of, your investment will reduce over time this many offsets. But that's not really a standard voluntary carbon credit. Whereas if you find projects that are verified by the gold standard, by BERA, formerly known as the Voluntary Carbon Standard, this logo here is the UN's Clean Development Mechanism, which was the first standard, and although they are sometimes of a lesser rigor and quality, some of those projects, like a lot of them when they were first developed were gas destruction projects, chemical gas destruction projects. That is still kind of the foundation of both the voluntary and the compliance carbon markets. And then these two standards here, the American Carbon Registry and Climate Action Reserve. The Climate Action Reserve runs the California carbon trading legal program, but pretty much any project, and I believe everyone who we've got here is supporting gold standard VCS and CCB, or Vera and CCB, but matching the quality of the offsets with the quality of the accounting, and then being able to move into, I'm gonna move my screen around here, but then being able to, on the public registries and platforms where these carbon offset standards track who has made what offsets, who has accomplished what emissions reductions, both with, I have Only Natural Pets, these are called retirement statements, basically on a regular basis. When Only Natural Pet or SA or Be Social Change purchase offsets, we take credits out of circulation on their behalf, so that those credits can only ever be attributed to the company for the specific emissions for a specific time frame. And that's a way to kind of make sure that the money that is being paid to go to these projects is actually making its way to the projects, and that an equivalent number of tons claimed to have been reduced are actually taken out of the marketplace. And I guess I'll pause here. I know that Only Natural Pet at one point you had, was it the some Colorado state legislature or legislator came and asked for proof. And I believe we just sent them the retirement receipts, and they kind of have, that's been it since then.
I don't know about, our colleague Monica usually is the one that we direct any legal issues towards, thankfully.
Yeah, I never heard of that, but maybe that's why it just got done, and we're out.
I will say, as far as the quality assurance.
Right. So,
I was just going to mention, Corey had mentioned earlier that they're pursuing B Corp certification, and we had gone through that process. And yeah, you essentially do, and Carbon Credit Capital has as well, and you essentially do like an audit, right? It's like you need to present all of your information, and they're not in a position to just take your word for it. They're like, oh, okay, now prove this to us. So the fact that we can kind of rely on Carbon Credit Capital and be like, yeah, we know that this is a trustworthy group we're working with, we know that they've done all of their research, and we can just kind of pass it along to B Corp. That means a lot to us, instead of needing to wade through all these muddy waters and try to say, oh, this group said that they planted a bunch of trees for us, and as Reed said, that doesn't necessarily equate to what is true offsets. So it does mean a lot to us to be able to present that as a claim and know that it's backed.
right, and I guess the other piece that I didn't put up here is there are certificates, and Jen mentioned it. There are certificates. There are actual claims that the company can make and publicize and put out there for people to see. And then there's the nuts and bolts, actual mechanics of making sure there's legitimacy behind those claims. So it's important to make sure that everything is addressed. And so we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but I know there's a lot going on in this slide, but we have discerned at CCC over time the way that consumer demands are shifting, and obviously we think that, I imagine that all of the panelists have noticed this as well, which is part of what we discussed earlier to drive you into this direction. But in terms of the ability to align some of the brand pillars that you mentioned, Corey, and I know that ONP has, and same thing with Be Social Change, through this work and through these projects, as well as the way that these analyses have kind of brought a greater understanding of the organization and what options you have over time to address the actual operational emissions, and I guess just a little more about what the customer reception has been, to kind of bolster this action and show you that there's some value there. And I guess with this one, I'll kick it off with Corey, since we haven't started with you yet.
I see there on the slide, it says consumer benefits, loyalty, and willingness to pay. It's been phenomenal being able to we've got in our email signatures and all the documentation we send to clients that it's carbon neutral travel. And that, granted, travel did take a considerable hit in 2020, pretty much right after we got certification, but we've gotten a lot of feedback and comments about how important that is to our clients. And, you know, as soon as it's safe to travel to do so, we're going to be the first ones that they contact to plan their trips. And no small part of that is the claims that we're able to make and back up with our certifications and the projects and the carbon offsets that we're purchasing. Like I mentioned before, our three pillars, we've got community, we've got awareness, we've got conservation. So it being able to offset our trips that a great majority of our trips don't focus fully on our conservation projects. We do offer packages to remote trails that, you know, trying to avoid over tourism, that we're trying to put economic kind of stimulus and vulnerable patrimony. But the great majority of our clients will go to Machu Picchu. They'll do the kind of the big hits, and being able to know that we're offsetting that carbon even and still giving the clients what they want has been incredibly valuable, both from a business perspective and also from just we're living our values, and it makes us glad and happy at the end of the day.
Excellent. I guess, Jen, I'll kick it back to you.
Sure. So I hinted earlier that Be Social Change actually had our community vote for which carbon offsets projects we would contribute the offsets of our events to. And that was such a fun process because we had people coming out of the woodwork to vote, to say, I think that, you know, soil enhancement in the US is the top project, and that's ultimately what our community voted for, where our offsets should go. And so it was an amazing engagement tool in the way that we used it. As far as willingness to pay, it's actually not something that we have measured, but it is, as I mentioned, that moment of delight when someone walks into or when someone used to walk into our events and say, hey, I didn't even realize that, like, you know, my taxi ride here, we accounted for that, was going to be covered, right? And so there's delight. There's also a huge amount of credibility that comes with this, right? People are probably a little bit more used to being bombarded on the sidewalk, at least in New York City, with different places where they can sign up for renewable energy, right? They can transfer their Con Ed bills to have 100% renewable energy. People are more aware of that. But when you start bringing carbon offsets to people's awareness, when you start saying, you know, what we did for our company is actually something that you can do for your next flight. It's been an amazing source of dialogue. And at the end of the day, that's what we're about, is creating those dialogues about how each one of us can work towards environmental justice, can work towards social justice, social impact. And so it's done well for our community and been really an amazing deep dive into a process for us so that we can recommend to our partners, recommend to others. As an organization, we definitely learned a lot and continue to do so from the Carbon Credit Capital team. And I think that it's just, it's a process I would recommend to anybody.
Then Andy and Rachel, I know that at one point there was, we kind of did analyses to determine, as you switch suppliers, reductions in emissions from the supply chain. So I know that there's been, and Angie, you mentioned it before, excuse me, about the, having these analyses determine what operational next steps you can take. But I know there's been a lot more in terms of educating the sales force and that. So I'll leave it to you guys to flesh some of that out as well.
You go, I go.
You can go, Rachel.
Okay. Well, I was just going to mention, as far as like loyalty, willingness to pay, credibility, sort of a big component with our customer interaction is with our packaging. I mean, we can train our sales force, like you're saying, we have things on the website highlighting different things on our B Corp certification, but definitely just having the B Corp logo and having the carbon credit logo on packaging, communicating that to consumers right away. More and more are getting used to what B Corp is and understanding what that is, identifying that, and really getting behind that. We've done some market research that millennials especially, are very behind social change and are very awake and aware and wanting to take this on. And so when they see that on packaging, they're getting curious, they're researching it, and they're understanding that it's a really important component. So I think that that's reflective in the market research, that that's something that is important to people right now. So it's great that we have that communication right there for people to see. Yeah, and I think that we probably have some things on the website, and you could probably speak to that as well. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those situations where customers are wanting to vote with their dollars, and they're realizing that this is something that is affecting all of us, and it's something that they want to be a part of, right? And it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult for customers to in their own lives just go carbon neutral, or a lot of people probably don't know that they can offset their personal carbon emissions or something like that. But when they're in the store and they're looking at it and they're saying, oh, this is a carbon neutral dog food, I can, not only know that this is a great product, but also be happy to share it with my pet and know that I'm helping reduce my pet's emissions, especially because your pet can't speak for him or herself. So they can't say, oh, I'm concerned about climate change. You have to be concerned about it for them. And when it comes to Salesforce training, Reed did a call with our sales team. Everyone was invited, and everyone was there to learn about what these carbon offsets are. And we take part in two programs. One is forest program in South America, and the other is a livestock program in China. And they both have nice stories associated with them, right? So the South American one, we're not only protecting forests, but that in turn is going to be protecting biodiversity, and it's going to be having benefits beyond just making pet food carbon neutral. And in the Chinese agriculture project, they're taking methane from pigs, so a very potent greenhouse gas, and they're able to convert that into natural gas to help power people's homes. So they have cooking fuel that isn't coal that they were burning otherwise, that is not only contributing greenhouse gas emissions, but also really doing a number on their respiratory health because they're doing it in tight areas. So it's one of those things, Jen has talked a lot about. It's just beyond environmental issues. It's also a social justice issue. And it's nice to know that those paths lead much further down those two avenues than just a little badge on a dog food bag. So there's a great story associated with it.
Excuse me for a second. Can't stop these spam calls even in the middle of a webinar. Okay, can everyone still see the presentation? So I guess, Andy, you brought up a good point that I think we've got a couple more minutes where we can kind of get into this. The health perspective, the human health factor. That the animal health is obviously a core tenet of Only Natural Pets brand, and same thing with Be Social Change. I mean, people were able to voice specifically, we this is what we value in terms of what the choices are given. And ultimately, the reason why I had this slide on quality was that good carbon offset projects can really advance causes related to the brand in a way that is kind of beyond product or beyond service or whatever it is someone might be doing. Now, of course, given all of these benefits that are there for everyone to claim, there are obviously a lot of things to consider in how to make sure that this goes smoothly and how to make sure that it doesn't break the bank or turn into a huge time suck. So I guess I kind of want to, and as we near the end of the session, we can begin to roll into Q&A as well, because I imagine that some of the people in attendance might have questions around this. But I kind of wanted to just open it up and kind of give open floor to discuss any of these potential areas or anything else that was pertinent to your decision making or were big question marks for you. Because it's not, I mean, we've talked a lot about doing things by the book, but it's not always so cut and dry with these different considerations. So I'm happy to select, or if anyone thinks that there's a specific one of these topics that they'd kind of like to go through, please jump in.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I would say that data collection is amazing and tricky when you have so many different moving pieces and there's a lot of variables within the product, as there are for events. And so we have found that one of the important things for us in this process is really just allocating time, and in doing so, it actually has improved our metrics for our own internal measurement. So I know that data collection feels probably a little bit intimidating for some, but I would say that it's an opportunity as much as anything else. I would also say if anybody does have the opportunity to engage their community in selecting projects, that was such a wonderful thing. Those would be my two pieces of advice.
Yeah, I can speak to that question a little bit, Reed. I see the controlling for cost bubble there, and we were a little concerned at first, kind of not knowing what we were wading into, that the cost of offsetting carbon for all of our trips would be prohibitive, or that we would have to really restructure the way that we price our tours. So just kind of public service announcement, we were really pleasantly surprised that it was economically feasible when we got the actual cost. Oh, that's all it takes. Well, then shoot, we should have been doing this years ago. So that was a really nice, pleasant surprise. And then bouncing off of what Jen said there, the data collection, it's kind of gathering all this information about what it takes to offset our carbon has allowed us to think long and hard about all of our other practices, and consider not just offsetting the carbon, but then you go into the reduce, reuse, recycle, the little green triangle image that we all grew up with, that, yeah, well, we need to also cut back on our single-use plastics. I mean, there's one thing of offsetting the carbon of them, but why don't we just reduce that? So we're implementing programs to have reusable water bottles. We're reducing, we've made adjustments and have plans to continue making adjustments as our carbon offset program has kind of inspired us to think critically about other aspects of what we do as a company.
Yeah, definitely. I'll jump in there after Corey and just kind of, echo what you said. Yeah, we have some other approaches we've taken with packaging as well to sort of go hand in hand just with our mission as a B Corp and looking for different packaging solutions. Right now, we're utilizing like 20 to 30% post-consumer recycled content into our bags. We've used sustainably sourced sugarcane and just different options that we've looked at. We've looked at going recycled packaging, compostable packaging, and just trying to find the best fit for right now, given what the current infrastructure can take, because some paths are not as good as others in certain circumstances. So yeah, just kind of looking at the whole picture and understanding, yeah, where you can control cost by using recycled materials, using upcycled ingredients, because that actually was a much cheaper route, really. And when you work with a parent company, you kind of have to pitch cost to them. You know, you have to sort of like back yourselves. You know, we are a certified B Corp, and when we're pitching a product and saying this is what we want, this supports our values, here's the cost, it's only a few cents. And in the long run, it's going to communicate this message to consumers that will have a great benefit and will sell the product. And really the part of the bottom line is selling the product, right? So it's all kind of goes hand in hand with everything of just making a successful product, but keeping all the sustainable factors in mind with the production of it. So for us, my advice is it's worth it. Do it. It's not very expensive. Yeah, the data collection can be a little tedious working with vendors, but stay on top of them, and before you know it, you're done, and then you can just have the benefits and sit back and know that you've done a good thing.
Yeah, just to add on that, for me, especially coming from the marketing side, the communicating of carbon neutrality externally is, you know, it's something that's ever evolving and something that we want to stay on top of, because I'm sure everyone here knows that the discussing climate change and greenhouse gas emissions can be as complex or as simple as you'd like it to be, right? And a lot of customers are just interested in knowing that they're doing the right thing and moving on from there. They're probably not curious as to what scope 3 emissions went into a certain product, or scope 1 they can kind of glaze over, especially even internally with Only Natural Pet. People are kind of like, you know, why should I ride my bike to work, or something like that. So those discussions can be difficult if you get too in the weeds, and it's nice to have a partner in Carbon Credit Capital who gets in the weeds for us and then returns us happy stories about where our offsets went, and we can say, oh, you know, it's not that we're preventing your scope 1, 2, or 3 greenhouse gas emissions. We're actually helping a family in China have a better standard of living, or we're helping a forest continue to support biodiversity in South America. So just the messaging is, yeah, I would just say, remember to keep it positive and keep it relatable, instead of, you know, let the experts get into the weeds and you tell the good stories.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And I guess let's just got a little bit more time here. One thing that we've seen over time in terms of some of the biggest challenges for folks is these initial scoping efforts, and kind of helping people wrap their minds around what does it mean to take a first step. And in the past few years, I mean, as we've been working with not only SMEs, but some especially very large companies, they are, you know, very concerned that if they start, it has to be perfect. If they're going to do it, it has to be, as Be Social Change decided, it has to be all in immediately. And realistically, for some organizations, it's not possible either, or not feasible either from a cost perspective or from a just general bandwidth and lift size of effort that it takes to put this together. It may not be feasible to do your entire value chain at once. And because this is still technically a voluntary market, you know, there are certain states where certain entities of certain sizes must report all of their emissions and must reduce their emissions against a certain benchmark. But for folks who are just kind of getting into it, you can kind of create a palette of things that you might have time for now, that you may look to tackle within the next couple years, and things that are otherwise are, you know, changing suppliers, changing input materials, changing logistics flows. Those are multi-year processes. So the one thing that we often like to encourage, and it seems as though this was certainly alive at Only Natural Pet. I think, as we've kind of taken it more so as it's come with Be Social Change and SA Expeditions, with the traveling pivots and with the in-person pivots. But if you're taking a solid approach, if you're following best practice carbon accounting standards, if you're supporting quality carbon offset projects, then there isn't much harm in saying we're going to start here. And there is even a fair amount of, like greenhouse gas ESG reporting agencies that are gaining steam around the world, like the Carbon Disclosure Project or the UN Global Compact. They just want to see that companies are taking this seriously and that they've thought it through and aren't just saying we're going to offset because it's easy. And so, realistically, there's more than likely a place for everyone and anyone to start, and depending on how I tried to make it seem as though these were coming from all different directions, but if you follow kind of scoping, controlling for cost, controlling for time spent, collecting data, if you set the bounds to be manageable from the beginning, then you're likely going to have something that is truly under your thumbs, so to speak, and that you can keep in control. And so with that, we've got 4 minutes left. And I guess I just want to say thank you to everyone on the panel for giving us these insights today. And I'm checking the question and answers. It doesn't seem as though we've got any questions. So if there's anyone still in attendance who has a burning question, ask now or forever hold your peace until the webinar is done and you can contact us. But yeah, thanks for everyone coming out. And I'm happy to throw it all back to you guys for some final words. Quit the sharing so I can actually look at you guys.
Yeah, I would just kind of add on to what Reed was saying there, which is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. On a previous slide, he was showing the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, which are something that as a global community we're striving to achieve in the coming decade here. And you're never going to get a perfect score on it, right? It's set up to be impossible to get a perfect score. So you don't go in thinking, oh, I'm going to be the best at this. You go in thinking, oh, I'm doing what's in the best interest of the sustainability of my business and the sustainability of our shared environment. So yeah, start if you're nervous, start small and see where it takes you.
I would just piggyback that to say 100%. I think you're spot on there. Don't let perfect be the enemy of progress. I would also say that as you embark on a journey of trying to figure out, how your organization can contribute to sustainable initiatives, I encourage every organization that we speak with to do it in a really wholesome way. If you don't currently have a mission statement, if you don't currently have values, start there and work backward. Offsets are one of the many options, and I think it's such an amazing option, clearly. But start from the very top and look at all of your options. Consider how to make an impact and what your unique role within the industry that you work in can be. So that's a little bit from the Be Social Change perspective, and I hope that everybody will check out some of our upcoming events too, available to people wherever you are.
Agreed. Yeah, start small. At the beginning of our carbon neutrality process, we got a little bit of feedback or pushback of kind of, well, offsetting carbon, what really is it going to do? But it's proven to do a lot for us and for as individuals. So starting small, baby steps, and a little bit does go a long way.
Okay. I guess Sorry, I can't see you if you've got any final words to send us off. I think you get the last word.
I very much appreciate that you put this together, Reed. I think I just said my fond farewell, but I'm grateful to have been able to participate with everyone here. Thank you.
And it looks, I guess we got a question, but we are effectively out of time. So if anyone, I guess after this, we'll be sending out a recording. I'll follow up with the panelists. If there are any questions specifically to you guys, we'll shoot them your way, if that's all right. And otherwise, if anyone else in attendance has questions in general, you can send them over to info@Carbon Credit Capital. My colleague PNPN, who has been helping administer this, that goes right to her. So you'll be in good hands. And with that, thanks everybody, and good luck out there and stay safe.
Thanks, Reed. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.